The spring game is back at Ohio Stadium. Also, fans, we'll get the details here from Pat Murphy from Bucknuts on 247 Sports, as well as what he's looking out for this coming Saturday at noon at the Shoe. Hey, Pat, how's it going today?
It's good. You're going to have actual football here this weekend, so something to be excited for.
Yeah, based on what Ryan Day told you guys, what can we expect at Saturday's spring game in regards to the format and also in the stands?
Yeah, so we got word last week about there being fans in the stands, which is a big deal, given they went pretty much all of last season without fans. They did at some points have, family and friends, but it was a very small amount. And if you saw it on TV, it looked very different than it ever does before. But they're going to have just under 20,000 fans, 19,180. 10,000 of those seats will go to Wexner Medical Center employees, the hospital here at Ohio State. Others will be given out to administrative people who've been affected by the pandemic over the last year. And then 4,500 tickets will go out to the general public, and 2,500 tickets will be reserved for Ohio State students who will not have to pay for them. So that's a nice thing that they're doing for the students there. And then on the field, it sounds like they're going to give it about half of a game to play as close to live as they can. Obviously, we've touched on a variety of injuries that they've had during spring, and so Ryan Day didn't want to commit to doing a full game, but he did say they'd probably do half of it live. He wasn't sure about full tackling. Obviously, you want to see a lot in this game, and not just the fans, but the coaches, and you want to see how players respond to things, but you also don't want anyone picking up, a injury or something that could affect the team going forward in what is essentially a glorified scrimmage. So it sounds like they'll at least do thudding or, two-hand touch, physical two-hand touch for the first half. And then Ryan Day said they'd probably get some of the guys, I imagine the more experienced guys, out of the game and have what he called the more controlled second half, which I imagine will be kind of a glorified practice where they try certain situations and do things. And the Buckeyes have done that in the past. I remember a couple of times under Jim Tressel where it didn't even feel like a game at all. It was more, we're going to work on this situation, then we're going to work on this situation, and they just happened to be doing it at the Horseshoe in front of a bunch of fans. So I think at least we'll get some, a half that looks like something like real football, which will be nice to see.
Do we know if we're going to have any semblance of a 50-yard dash during halftime, or the quarterback's getting out there trying to chuck it 70 yards as Cardell Jones has in the past against JT Barrett and that sort of display?
Yeah, they haven't said anything about that. I wonder, because a lot of that is often either guys coming back that are, in the NFL. You mentioned JT Barrett, Cardell Jones. They've done that coming back. I know they've done like races and stuff before where students get involved. I think because of the COVID stuff, they're trying, it just makes it more difficult in terms of trying to get more people onto the field if you're limiting the capacity and whatnot anyway. So that stuff may have to wait another year before you can kind of get the fun halftime aspect back. But they haven't said anything either way, so we'll have to wait and see on that one.
Speaking of COVID, as we have ad nauseum for the past year or so, but that's what we're living in. Get your mask, Buckeye fans, at voiceofcollegefootball.com. Get your mask. Anyone who roots for college football, we've got 35 teams available, so we should have yours right there. Register for free at the top of the screen at voiceofcollegefootball.com. Got Pat Murphy on the line to talk Ohio State football with us each and every week. We appreciate Pat's insight. And you got a chance to talk to the defensive lineman this past week, and some possible replacements for some of the better players inside in the interior in college football last year.
Yeah, specifically on the inside, Ohio State lost Tommy Togiai, who was, a kind of a revelation last year, stepping in as a starter, replaced Devon Hamilton at nose tackle, and was so good that he was able to declare for the NFL draft early. And played really well for the Buckeyes. He didn't play in the national championship game due to COVID reasons. You could tell that the Buckeyes missed him. So somebody you want to replace. And they've got a number of guys. Antoine Jackson, this is, I think, his third year in the program, but his sixth year in college football. Overall, he went to Auburn first and then transferred back to Ohio State. Jerron Cage, who started that national championship game But the guy I'm most excited about, and especially because of what was kind of said about him last week, is Teron Vincent, who is a 5-star, second best defensive tackle, I believe, in the country, coming out of high school. And everyone thought he was going to be, the next big time interior defensive lineman. There were comparisons with a guy like Aaron Donald in terms of his athletic ability and what he could do. And he has not lived up to that. A shoulder injury, had to have surgery, other injuries that have lingered. Went into last season not 100%, couldn't really go for most of the year. And then once he did start to play, they'd already established Togiai and the other guys in there. So I think that this could be, if he can stay healthy, which by all accounts he is. Ryan Day said Teron Vincent may be the most improved player on the defense right now, just because he's able to finally do everything that he's capable of doing, and he's not battling any sort of injuries. That could be a guy who, by mid-season you're talking about as, a very, kind of surprising. I mean, if you followed recruitment, his name, but if you're just a normal Buckeye fan who doesn't pay too much attention to that, you're probably not aware of him. So that's a name to keep in mind. And obviously that's an important position. You need that next to Haskell Garrett. And I think there'll be some rotation, as Larry Johnson likes to do with all of his defensive lineman positions. But if Teron Vincent can be that 5-star guy that he was coming out of high school, went to IMG Academy, that would be huge for Ohio State.
Possibly the 2020 version of Justin Hilliard, who was highly recruited coming into the system, and took him quite a few years, injuries and so forth, and playing behind guys, and then emerged considerably as a big-time talent last season. All right, Pat Murphy breaking down the spring game as we head into Saturday, noon Eastern time at Ohio Stadium. All right, for me, the quarterback position's the obvious one. You at least get to see how the guys can put velocity on the ball, touch on the ball, throw on time, throw accurately, even if you don't necessarily get a great feel for how much of a command they have of the offense. You can just see the raw throwing ability and elusiveness in the backfield. Also, line play is difficult for me to gauge in a spring game, especially when you're splitting up starters, especially along the offensive front. But considering the struggles in the secondary last year, and considering this may be the best wide receiver unit in the country, to see those guys go up against each other and to see if the secondary can hold up against those wide receivers, I think might be telling.
Absolutely. I think quarterback is always going to be interesting. Even if you have a returning guy, I think fans are always interested in how the quarterback's progressing and how the guy behind him looks. And obviously when you have a battle like this with 3 guys who haven't really played, that's certainly going to be one of the major talking points from the spring game. But the secondary has been, 1B to that 1A throughout the spring because of the struggles last year. Obviously, Sevyn Banks is hurt. Cameron Brown's still recovering from an injury. So in terms of cornerbacks, you're going to have some young guys in there. Ryan Watts, Legend Cavazos. There's a handful of guys that I think they're going to rotate in. And what does it look like schematically? I think will be really interesting as well. Do we get to see maybe some of the wrinkles that Ohio State has apparently tried to work in, or some of the change-ups is what Ryan Day calls it. I don't know if we'll see a ton of that, but I will just be interested to see how this all works, how it looks, everything like that in the secondary. And then another position, and we've talked about it to some degree, but I'm really interested to just kind of get a feel for this pecking order at running back. I think at this point, Master Teague will be the guy to at least get things going. But, we've talked before about, there's a lot of talent behind him, and can he hold off guys? Last year he wasn't really able to hold off Trey Sermon by the end of the year. So I'll be watching to see that. These 2 freshmen, they had a scrimmage over the weekend, just Travion Henderson, Evan Pryor. Apparently both did very well. Travion Henderson had his black stripe removed, which is Ohio State's kind of special way of saying you've earned the right to be a Buckeye. So that means he's doing things the right way. Evan Pryor apparently was impressive too. So I'm interested to see these guys run a little bit more. Mayan Williams, who looked good last year, but we haven't seen, I think, only 10 carries. He'll be entering his second year. And then Marcus Crowley, Steele Chambers. You've seen flashes from both of them, but just not enough sample size. So a spring game is a time when you can at least get a sense, and especially with a running back. Now, if they're not tackling, it makes it a little bit more difficult, but it'll be interesting to watch all of these guys and see if there is any sense of how they're breaking down and what each guy can do to help this offense.
Are they going to have a full media complement at the game? Are they allowing just whomever is typically a credentialed?
It sounds like it will be limited to some degree, but not as much as it was, during the fall. We applied for credentials late last week, I think. So we haven't heard back for sure on how many people they're going to allow in there, but it does sound like things are becoming a bit more relaxed. I don't know if anyone's ever been in that Ohio State press box, but it is pretty big. So, there's no visiting media, obviously, for this. I don't imagine there'll be a ton of national media trying to make their way to Columbus like there is for some of the Buckeye games in the fall. So you can kind of spread people out, I think, a little bit more, maybe able to get more outlets, more people in there.
Folks, we'll be live after the spring game to take your calls and talk Ohio State football. Pat Murphy on the line from Bucknuts 247 Sports. You know the brand. You know the content over there, so please head on over there and catch his work and everybody else there at 247 Sports Bucknuts. Pat, appreciate you stopping by. Enjoy the game on Saturday.
All right, we'll do. You too.